In the news this week, and fingerprints, eye scans now required to buy food in India. We've been telling you about India, and I'll paraphrase this. India has 1.3 billion people, 1.3 billion. They have successfully numbered 1.1 billion of them. They have eliminated cash. 85% of the cash is gone. And now you can't buy food in India unless you have an iris scan or unless you have fingerprints. There's a string of interesting financial reports, this article says, from India this week that appear to be unrelated at first glance, but upon further inspection, they all seem to be working towards a common goal. An intrusive Big Brother surveillance state that tracks every single financial transaction for every single resident. As a matter of fact, it's called Aadhaar, and basically it's being forced on people in India. Most of India is already enrolled in the program, with a total of 1.1 billion people already being signed up. In short, you cannot buy or sell unless you have your fingerprint in a database and your eye scan. Does that sound familiar to Revelation? Okay, over the past several years, the government in India has been slowly building the program. One lady was a 30-year-old environmental consultant in Delhi, Alta Jida, said this, that she was interviewed by the Times. She said she was forced into the program. I'm quoting, "You almost feel like life is going to stop without Aadhaar," she said. In some cities, listen to this one, parents are not allowed to leave hospitals with newborn children until they are signed up. So if you think that type of control grid isn't possible in the United States, this article says, think again. Harvard professor Jacqueline Bruda praised the drastic new policy, saying that no one has approached that scale and that ambition. It has been hailed, and justifiably so, as an extraordinary triumph for everyone to get registered. In a statement released this week, the Central Bank of India also announced that financial institutions in the country would no longer be able to deal with cryptocurrencies, which means that the residents will no longer be able to purchase cryptocurrencies or cash out through their banks. That means that if they have cryptocurrencies and they bought them in India, they have lost. They can't cash them out in a bank in India. And so they're trying to, obviously it's a governmental control. It's something that is setting a pace. Who had thought that India would set the pace for a new world system? And they are. Let me give you another thing. California. Sometimes I pick on California, rightly so. Just want you to know that. We have a lot of people listening in California. This is not against you that love God. This is against California. All right, well, listen. Astonishing California bill will shut down free speech and require fact checkers. The bill is entitled SB 1424. It's about internet social media. What it says is this. We have social media. We broadcast this and it goes on YouTube and Facebook Live and YouTube in about a day. And thanks to all of our volunteers. And if I was based in California, I'd have to have someone from the government, this bill says, it's not passed yet, sitting in one of these seats to fact check me. So anything I said, they can take off of Facebook. And so they're starting to set the pace for this, and hopefully it won't get to any place else other than California, or hopefully it won't even get in California. But the bill will require a person who operates a social media as defined internet website with a physical presence in California to develop a strategic plan to verify news stories shared on its website. So my first question is, who are these fact checkers? They're coming from the government, and what is their bias? What do they say? Who's checking the fact checkers? And so basically it's something that's it's going against your First Amendment rights. It's a matter of free speech. In America, you used to be able to, and hopefully you'll still be able to have free speech and say anything you want to say. People can say anything they want to say about anybody they want to say. It's called free speech. This will squash free speech in California. Something needs to be really done about that. An example. There are some people who don't believe you should vaccinate your children. Whether they're right or wrong, they don't believe that. That's kind of statement coming out of California on a website. If this bill passes, they will not be able to say that. The government will regulate everything you say and every opinion you have. Obviously, that's an Orwellian society. Let me give you this next one that comes in. And by the way, this is the picture that goes with this next one. And this is a very captivating story. 5 compelling reasons why the YouTube shooting has disappeared from the headlines. You remember the woman that's right there had shot up YouTube? How remember that, hearing it? How many heard it more than once? No. You only heard it a couple times, if any. You had to switch channels. They quickly dropped the story. If this was a shooting in a school, you'd hear it for weeks and weeks and weeks. So why is it that they dropped this story in most of the ABC cycles and the news cycles? Breaking news alerts announcing reports of a shooting on YouTube headquarters quickly faded from the spotlight and out of the news cycle. And there are a number of imperative reasons why the rampage initiated by a woman who injured 3 people and then killed herself has not been used to push the mainstream's media obsession with gun control. Here are the 5 compelling reasons. Number 1, as a woman, a peaceful vegan, and a PETA advocate, the suspected shooter is opposite the typical mass shooter profile promoted by the mainstream media. Most mass shooters, if not all of them, are men. It's very rare for a woman to be a mass so she should have had a lot of coverage. So why didn't she? When a suspected shooter was identified as Nassim Najafi Agdam, 39-year-old woman attempting to carry out a mass shooting, when the overwhelming majority of mass shooting suspects are typically men in their early 20s, it may have seemed as though she would actually receive more media attention, as I said, than most. However, Adham does not appear to have been a white supremacist. She wasn't a crazy conspiracy theorist or a religious cult member. Instead, she was a vegan YouTube content creator with a long list of bizarre videos and a passion for animal rights. Despite being Iranian American, which would excite those who are hungry for war with Iran, it does not appear that Agdam had a political motive or was affiliated with any terrorist group. Secondly, the shooter reportedly used a handgun, which also deviates from the mainstream narrative that all mass shooters use high-profile weapons, AR-15s and assault weapons. So that doesn't say what the liberal media says, so they're not going to do it. It's a 9mm handgun. You cannot, and you will never be able to ban all 9mm handguns. There's just way too many of them. And so they stayed away from it because basically she bought this handgun in California legally. She was going through all the channels, bought the handgun legally. So you don't hear anything about gun control because of that. Third, the shooting happened in California, a state that has already enacted some of the strictest gun control laws in the nation. They actually have the hardest gun control laws. Shooting happened in San Bruno, California, has the hardest gun control laws in the United States. So why does the media stay away from it? Because they're pushing for gun control laws. Well, how could you push for gun control laws when this happened in a spot that has the hardest ones that are in the United States? Fourth, the police were warned about the shooting by the suspect's father in advance, and they did nothing, something the media tends to cover up. As a matter of fact, the father called the police department. He told her, my daughter is in a rampage. She has a 9mm gun. She's going to shoot up YouTube tomorrow. They found her at 2 a.m. in the morning in her car, and the police did absolutely nothing. And so I want you to understand that basically, when police reportedly found her sleeping in her car the morning of the shooting, it wasn't clear why greater surveillance measures were not taken at YouTube's headquarters, or how long the attack lasted before Agdam took her own life and the police arrived. The shooter, number 5, the shooter blamed YouTube for censoring and demonizing her videos. Here's what happened. When you have so many videos on YouTube, they start to pay you. They do it through advertising. Well, they didn't like her videos, so they censored them and they took them off. Why would the media not report that? Because the media does not want to tell you that YouTube is censoring things on their websites. And so we're watching the liberal media ignore certain pieces of news and bring in other pieces of news. And so it's another proof that the liberal media is really not feeding us anything. They're feeding their own agenda. Let me give you another one. This is one that's from Israel, and it's one that's kind of interesting. It's a new one for you tonight. The Hamas gimmick that failed. The recent Hamas Friday of Tires, they called something that's a protest, Friday of Tires. Listen to this. The protest failed to achieve its main objective, which was to impede the actions of the IDF marksmen on Israel's border with Gaza Strip. The Palestinians did not manage to infiltrate Israeli territory. They were marching and gathering together. Last year, 40,000 of them gathered together on this yesterday. Today, only 10,000. Yesterday, only 10,000. So the 40,000 and the massive numbers they had didn't turn out. The reason they call them to the border is so they can infiltrate Israel en masse. So what they did is they took thousands and thousands and thousands of tires and they set them ablaze. As they set them ablaze, the black smoke was to be able to deter any IDF soldiers from shooting someone coming across the border. How many of you getting this? So according to official statistics released by the Palestinian Health Ministry, at least 10 Palestinians were killed during the Friday of Tires in Gaza. Around 1,400 were injured, 33 of whom were in serious condition. It's illegal for them to come across that border because they're coming to kill Jews, and so that border is protected. The second week of the return, it's called, it's a return campaign, organized by Hamas, ended in failure. According to IDF estimates, which Palestinians do not deny, only around 10,000 people took part in the events compared to 40,000 I said before the previous year. So why is it a failure? The Hamas leadership, who did not want to lose too many participants at its event, gave into pressure from the younger generation in Gaza. The younger generation in Gaza, you ready for this? Do not want to infiltrate Israel. You know why? Because they're not returning to anything. They've been born there. There's no return for them. They've never lived in Israel. They've always lived in Gaza. According to Fatah sources in Gaza, the Hamas leadership believed that this new gimmick would succeed following the failure of underground tunnels project to infiltrate Israel. Well, it didn't succeed because all Israel did is they used water cannons to put out the tires. There it is. And they flew drones in. So basically, they knew exactly what they were doing. However, the assessment of the results shows the purpose for which the thousands of tires were burned was not achieved. The IDF forces at the Gaza border were prepared in advance. Whenever necessary, again, they used water cannons, fans. They fanned the smoke back onto them. I mean, come on. And hoses to disperse the flames. Anyone who attempted to approach the border fence, damage it, cross it, or carry out terror attacks under cover of the smoke of the tires was hit by sniper fire. Palestinians did not manage to infiltrate the territory of Israel in their vast numbers, and the Israeli deterrent was preserved. Hamas announced, though, through its spokesman, that the families of those killed in the return campaign will receive $3,000 each. While anyone seriously injured would get $500, and anyone sustaining moderate injuries would be given $200. Fatah in Gaza considers Hamas' promise of financial incentives to the demonstrators to be an attempt to encourage the culture of martyrdom. It's called shahada in Arabic, for the sake of monetary gain and the exploitation of the suffering of civilians caused by humanitarian crisis. So Hamas's plans are failing in Gaza. The people of Gaza, especially the younger ones, understand that it's a one-sided deal, that Hamas is trying to fuel this fight with Israel, and they have no part in it. They don't want to have any part in it. So a huge failure. Also this week, 70 years after World War II, Israeli Holocaust survivors still suffer. Cast me not off in the time of my old age, when my strength fails, forsake me not. Psalm 71:9 says. In Israel, at sundown yesterday, April 11th, and again at 11 o'clock on April 12th, sirens resounded throughout the country. Traffic comes to a standstill even on major highways, and pedestrians stand in place for 2 minutes. The moment of silence commemorates 6 million Jews murdered from 1933 to 1945 during the Holocaust, and honors those who survived. Today, more Holocaust survivors live in Israel than anywhere else in the world. Approximately 186,000 Holocaust survivors are in Israel. About 60,000 live in poverty. This is a shame. There are feeding centers. There's many feeding centers. We support one. Mark Correll Ministries supports one in Tiberias. Almost 40 to 50% of the people that come to that feeding center in Tiberias have tattoos on their arms because they're Holocaust survivors. They live in abject poverty. And listen, you need to pray that they are being helped. Let me tell you why it happened this way. They get an allotment since 1953. If the compensation of survivors who came prior to 1953 would get $7,920 a year. But if they came after 1953, they get nothing. And so the government has not given them any supplement, and they're living in poverty. It's a second atrocity that's going on with them. And so hopefully that article that's circulated around the world this week is going to raise some money for that. Let me give you a little bit more that's going on, because there's a lot of things happening in Israel. An Israeli airstrike, a recent missile strike on a military airbase deep in central Syrian desert, looks like the latest installment in a long-standing Israeli campaign to police its red lines against highly dangerous developments to the north. I'm not going to read you all this article, but I'm going to tell you about this. Syria is a hotbed. Syria is a no man's land. And what I mean by that is it's not controlled by anyone. Even though Russia's propping up Bashar al-Assad, Syria is in a middle zone. Iran is trying to put its grips in it. Iraq is trying to put its grips in it. We have the Hezbollah is trying to put its grips in it. Russia's trying to come down. And America basically is trying to help the Kurds and the people that are fighting. So what we see there, Lebanon is already a well-established Iranian rocket base. What's happening is Iran is using Syria to infiltrate Syria so they can get to a warm water port just like Russia, and they can get closer to Israel. Everyone fears Iran in the Middle East because Iran is a wild card. If they get nuclear weapons, they're going to control the entire Middle East. The Saudi Arabians are afraid of them. They are, and I'll give you an article on that. Everyone doesn't want Iran to succeed. So you have a Russian complication. Russia comes down, and they back up Bashar al-Assad. So what happened this week is Israel called up the United States, and they told them they had information about deep in Syria about something going on. They didn't tell us what, and they said, we're going to take it out. And so they flew F-22s into the heart of Syria, and they bombed. They did not call up Russia. They just did it because the IDF, the Mossad, which is their secret service, is so sophisticated. They have infiltrated it tremendously. And so basically, I promise you, higher up in Syria, there are Mossad agents posing as Syrians. I know that to be true because in 1966, there was a man called Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen was supposedly a postal worker in Israel. He infiltrated Syria and became second in command in Damascus. He almost became the president of Syria. They won the war because of Eli Cohen. They killed him and they hung him in a town square. His wife found out only by watching it on TV. They still won't return his body, but he's a hero in Israel. So what I'm saying that to tell you this, they have infiltrated everywhere. There is no one better than Israel when it talks about spying or understand what's going on. So what is the big quagmire there? What's going on? Well, Israel's defending itself. The world, by the way, is not saying a thing about it because they can't. And so they're defending themselves quite a bit. When I get to a couple more articles on war, I'm going to show you why. Before I do that, so Israel's defending itself. Listen to what the Saudi Arabian prince said. He said the Israelis have the right to their own land. He says, I believe that each people anywhere have a right to live in their peaceful nation. The crown prince said, and there's a lot of interest in his country shares with Israel. This is a 98% Muslim country, saying he has a right. They have a right to exist. Totally different than Iran. Totally different than Syria. He says Israel's a big economy compared to their size and its growing economy. And of course, there's lots of interests, he says, we share with Israel. And if there is peace, there would be a lot of interest between Israel and the Gulf Cooperation Council. That's about 18 Muslim countries. Then he goes on, he says this at the end. Bin Salam also said, he's the prince, said Saudi Arabia does not have a problem with Jews, saying that that Islam's prophet Muhammad married a Jewish woman. As a matter of fact, he actually married 12 different women. And basically 2 of them were Jewish. One of them was Rayana bint Zayed, and the other one was Safiya bint Huyayya. These 2 women were widows whose husbands were specifically killed by Muslims because they were the most beautiful women he ever saw. So he had their husbands killed in a war, and he took them to wife. And so, yeah, they shouldn't have a problem with the Jews. Muhammad didn't. He took 2 to wife. So let me give you this one now as we go a little bit with war. Syria is fighting over the corpse. Listen to this. The Syrian government's chemical attack on civilians in the rebel-held suburb of Douma this week is the complete responsibility of the war criminal Bashar al-Assad, his Russian bedfellows, and his Iranian bankers. An independent country for only 2 years longer than the state of Israel, Syria has reverted to its prior status as space across which the competing interests of bigger empires and armies are played out. It's always been that way. Syria's Old Testament name is Assyria. Actually, part of it was also Persia, but most of it was Assyria. It's been conquered over and over again. It's always been this political football. Assyria, as a land, has had many masters. Persia's Cyrus the Great mastered it and conquered it in 539 BC. Macedonians Alexander the Great in 333 BC. Rome's Pompey, General Pompey the Great, captured it in 64 BC. The Byzantine Empire, 395 AD. The Muslims arrived in the 7th century. The Umayyad and the Abbasid Caliphates, I talked about those, and the Ayyubid and the Zingid and the Harnanian dynasties. Crusaders followed and they conquered it. Then the Assyrians, the Mamelukes, the Mongols, the Ottoman Empire conquered the space in 1516, kept it until 1917, till World War I ended. That was a caliphate. That was the last great caliphate. Today, the French conquered it and ruled it after World War II. World War I. The only ever independent Syria was established in 1946, just 2 years earlier than Israel. Today, Russia claims that the Syrian government controls 85% of the country. That is not true. The Syrian government doesn't control anything. They don't control a single thing. It is a country up for grabs. Russia props up and abets the criminality of the Assad regime, maintaining positions along the northeastern part of the coast, where it has 2 naval bases and an air base generally secure in Alawite territory. So what am I saying? Russia is into Syria because Russia wants warm water ports. 2 Mediterranean ports. They have 2 naval bases. They didn't have that. They were trying in 1979 to win Afghanistan, and they lost, by the way, because we funded the Afghan rebels and we gave them arms to defeat Russia after 10 years. How many are still with me tonight? I know I'm rambling, but just listen. So if you really want to see what's happening in Syria, this is Syria. This is how messed up it is. These are, if you look at some of the charts here, this is Sunni. This color right here is Sunni. Those are Sunni Muslims. These are Shiism, and there's two different types of Shia, and they're more in the darker green right over here. So the Sunnis outweigh the Shia, and the Sunnis hate the Shia, and the Shia hate the Sunnis. The only ones both of them hate more are us and Israel. And so let me just tell you what's going on here. So then you have the Alawism. Alawism is this blue spot. We know that Bashar al-Assad is an Alawist. He's a very, very small minority, and we know that he is trying to do whatever he can there. Look at the red is Christians. Look at the pockets of Christians that are here. And so Druze are a type of Muslims, but they're really kind of a really peaceful type of Muslim. So you have all these different things that are going on here, and this thing is not being ruled by anyone. Now notice this. This is Jerusalem. This is the Israeli coast. That's the western coast of Israel. This right here, you're going into Lebanon. There's Beirut, and you can see the concentration that's right here. Hezbollah is deeply embedded in here. And here, right here, is where Russia has established two of its naval bases. Let me tell you why. Because this is Alawite territory. This is territory that Bashar al-Assad, they're favorable to him. They could never establish those bases over in here. That's the whole reason why Russia is there. How many of these gives you a little bit better understanding of it? So the United States is caught in a quagmire. Somebody's going to control Syria. Nobody inside Syria is able to control it. The Sunnis and the Shia are fighting against each other. They'll never elect one or the other to any type of office. We know the Alawites, other than Bashar al-Assad, he's pretty much the last ruler you ever see is an Alawite. He's hanging on by a thread. And the only reason why he's there is because Russia knows they can control these spots. If he was not Alawite, Russia would have killed him long ago because he can control these areas. So it's a quagmire. What's happening is Syria is a keystone. It is whoever controls Syria controls the Middle East. And so Iran is starting to put weapons in there. They're trying to put bases in there. So what's happening is Israel knows it. And Israel's taking every opportunity to bomb everything they possibly can that's coming into Syria. And who's going to stop them? No one. And so they know that. So I don't know if that clears it up a little bit. You can always go to Wolf Blitzer. He won't tell you a thing. Let me give you a little bit more as we're going on by war. So we have this chemical dumping, or this chemical bombing that Bashar al-Assad did with Russia's approval, obviously. Chemical weapons have been outlawed since World War I. You're not supposed to use chemical weapons on civilians. You're not supposed to use them on war. He has used chlorine gas. He's used sarin gas. And these things are absolute killers. When a child inhales sarin gas, he suffocates to death. And so 40 children were killed in this last one. That's why, you know, when you had President Obama, he said, we're going to let Syria do whatever they want to do until they use gas. That's the red line, he said, and we will not let them do that. What happened? They used Syrian gas, and he erased the red line. He did nothing. So Trump's left with trying to do something humanitarianly. So he's told Russia, who obviously knows about it, that I'm going to bomb Syria. I'm going to strategically bomb it. Russia says, you do that, and we will take out everything you will take out your missiles, and we will take out the places they came from. Well, the way we will bomb it is we have destroyers right now that have been mobilized to the Mediterranean Sea. They have Patriot missiles, they have smart bombs. A smart bomb can do this. They can go 8,000 miles and hit a target this big. So they can pinpoint a home. Bashar al-Assad is nowhere to be found. He's not in his country. And so you won't hear it on the news. He has fled somewhere. He's in hiding because the first place one of those bombs is going to go is into his living room. And so he's in hiding. So what Russia do is they have this bravado saying that they're going to take us out. I'm not so sure that Russia can do that. Let me tell you why. As you look at these batteries of anti-Patriot missiles, that's what they are, anti-ballistic missile batteries from Russia. There's reports coming out that says that they may not be able to even do anything to American missiles. They don't have the sophistication, they don't have the weaponry. These missiles fly under radar, these missiles are supersonic, and so they've been trying to do that since the 1990s. And so it may be just a bluff from Russia. The problem I see is that who wants to bluff about missiles? Who wants to bluff about lives? And so I do believe that he's getting, I probably believe that in the White House right now and in the cabinet, there's mixed feelings. I probably believe that you can't do this, it's going to escalate. You should do this or it's going to escalate. So I don't envy the president, by the way. I don't envy him. It's a tough call. And sooner or later, he's going to have to do something about it. And we know that. Let me give you a little bit about religion as we go further. And hopefully, I'm bringing you up to snuff because you know, if you go home and you miss CNN, you're going to miss all this. Europe's civilization exhaustion, this article says. And let me tell you about this call that says Eurabia. Christianity as a default, as a norm, is gone. And probably gone for good, or at least for the next 100 years. This is a man that has wrote it and has talked about it for a long time. According to this man by the name of Boulevant, many young Europeans will have been baptized and then never darken the door of a church again. Cultural religious identities just aren't being passed on from parents to children. It just washes straight off them. And we know the Muslim birth rate is higher, much higher, than the general population, and they have much higher religious retention rates. Richard Dawkins, an atheist and author of The God Delusion, he doesn't believe in God at all, responded to this study released by tweeting to his millions of Twitter followers, "Before we rejoice at the death throes of the relatively benign Christian religion," he hates Christianity, "let's not forget Hilar Belloc's menacing rhyme, always keep a hold of a nurse for fear of finding something worse." Dawkins is apparently concerned that after the demise of Christianity in Europe, there will be an atheistic utopia, not an atheistic utopia, which he wants, but a rise of Islam. And so what they wanted is they wanted Christianity to go, these atheists, but they're afraid now, because if it does go, what it's going to be replaced by is something far, far, far worse for them than they could ever imagine. European civilization exhaustion. Let me give you a little bit more about religion. Man, we're going on tonight, aren't we? Religion. What's my favorite thing to talk about in religion? The Pope. Pope Francis' economic agenda does millennials no favor. On Palm Sunday, the World Youth Day, Pope Francis told a group of youth not to keep quiet if others keep quiet. Young people should take his advice and speak out against Pope Francis' economic agenda. He says this in his exhortation, which is called Evangelii Gaudium. That's his joy of the gospel. It's when he speaks. Pope Francis said, "Young people call us to renewed and expansive hope, for they represent new directions for humanity and open us up to the future, lest we cling to a nostalgia for structures and customs which are no longer life-giving in today's world. Those young people, he said, those young people should note that Pope Francis clings himself to outdated structures and customs. He continues to push high tax, government wealth redistribution, communist model, and that undermines market capitalism, which entrepreneurs, young and old, need to thrive. Pope Francis argues, now listen to this, that capitalism and globalization lead to poverty, I'm quoting, and inequality. For those of you that back the Pope, every time you hear me say something and want to write me something, check this out, fact find. He believes that free markets and globalization and capitalism leads to poverty and inequality. He said it. I'm quoting him. In 2015 interview, he said, "It is true that in absolute terms the world's wealth has grown, but inequality and poverty have risen also." His anti-market fervor stands at some distance from the actual facts. The Pope is giving us false news. From 1981 to 2013, the percent of the world's population living in absolute poverty, which is incomes less than $2 a day, fell from 42% to 10%, according to the World Bank. It happened as market liberalization spread, capitalism, lifting billions of people out of abject poverty over the past 2 decades alone. More than 500 million people in China escaped crushing poverty after pro-market reforms allowed unprecedented freedom for entrepreneurs to start new businesses, invest capital, innovate with new technology, trade globally, and hire the best employees. They were hiring people, so people got lifted out of poverty. The Pope does not know what he's talking about. Oh boy, I'm going to get some cards on that one. All right, let me give you a couple more. You still with me tonight? All right, here you go. Moral decay, the end of Girl Scouts. Oh, excuse me, girl sports. Male trans athletes changing face of sports. Girl Scouts probably coming next. If our world survives a few more generations, historians will doubtlessly look back at our current era and ask, was there something in the water? Something in the air? How is it that an entire society went mad at the same time? This article writer says, if you read my columns over the years, you know that I have compassion on those who genuinely struggle with their gender identity. That's something I wouldn't wish on anyone, something I do not treat lightly. At the same time, you know that I have often spoken against today's cultural madness in which perception becomes reality. A great phrase right there. In the latest example of that madness, the Boston Marathon, among other marathons, has announced that men who identify as women can compete with the women. Now the problem with that is this. We're made different. I don't know if that's so rudimentary that we forget it, but men and women are not the same. We can't do the same things. And I know people think you can, but you're geared differently. Your chromosomes are differently. There's 6,500 chromosomes that women have that men don't have. if a woman stands against that wall and she stands flat against that wall and I put a chair there, she can lift it up without bending her legs. A man can't do that. So there's certain things you can't do. Our structure, our bone. Women generally, I mean, you're not a rocket scientist. Women generally are not as tall as men. I'm not talking about the exceptions. There's differences. How many of you know, I don't even know why I'm asking this, but how many of you know there's a difference between a man and a woman? Obviously, our society doesn't know that. So listen to how bizarre this gets. Are you ready for this? So in the Boston Marathon, if you're a transgender, it means you're fully male, but you're just kind of, you know, you've maybe taken some hormones, maybe you haven't even completed any sex surgery, you can run. The problem is, there are going to be men who are transgenders winning the women's side. And the prize money is $150,000 for men and $150,000 for women. How many of you know there's going to be some men that are going to be transgender just to win the $150,000? So what? Who cares about the facts these days, though? And what I feel is the only thing that matters. That's really what happens. My morality, my truth, my reality. Yet this corporate insanity is not limited to America. Listen to this. This will blow you away. Writing for the Daily Wire, Amanda, and she has a very long last name, tells us what is happening in Iran. This is a 98% Muslim nation. The Iranian women's soccer team has found a loophole, their soccer team. Instead of comprising a team of actual women, they have added on 8 full-grown men who they claim are transgender and awaiting sex changes. The country's football association, soccer, was accused of being unethical for knowingly fielding 8 men in its women's team, reports the Telegraph. 8 players have been playing with Iran's female team without completing sex change operations, said Mojabaz Shafri, an official described as close to the Iranian league. Yes, members of the national team were ordered on Wednesday to undergo gender testing, Iran's soccer governing body implementing random checks in 2014 after 4 women team's players were discovered to be biological men who never underwent a sex change. So just follow this for a moment. If you're wondering why these male players weren't noticed before, this is bizarre. It's because players on the Iranian women's team, 98% Muslim, are mandated to wear long sleeve jerseys, pants, and hijabs. They cover their face, they cover everything except right here. So the men said, hey, just think about it. We can go and play, and they will never know we're men, because they're all covered. Adding to the sad irony of this story is while homosexual acts are punishable by death in Iran, Sharia law, sex change surgery is rampant and is actually pushed on gays by some Islamic clerics. So Islamic clerics tell gays, you need to be able to change your sex so that you're not a homosexual, and then you'll be accepted by Mohammedan God. So it's simply saying there's a reason we have boys sports and girls sports in our children's schools. Let's not forget about the locker rooms and the showers. And there's a reason why we divide into male and female sports in every major professional league, as well as the Olympics. Men and women are built differently. Research has identified 6,500 genes that are expressly different in men and women. It makes perfect sense. A 2014 report from the University of Helsinki indicated that identifying genetic associations with X chromosomal genes can be particularly valuable in helping researchers to understand why some characteristics such as height differ between the sexes. So here's my take. Here's my opinion. You know, opinion comes from the word opine. It means you think about things. So I've been opining about this. So here's what I did. I wrote it down so I could read it. Forget all that scientific nonsense, that we are different. That's only good and when we want to dispute God. This, on the other hand, is a case of what I feel, what I think is moral, and what I think is right. If I think it's right, it's got to be right. It's funny to me that liberals will use science when they want to disprove God, but they'll ignore it when they want to prove what they want to do is right. All right, this one people have been asking me about, so I'm going to tell you. And again, I'm taking a couple of more minutes. This is coming, according to him. Biblical prophecy claims the rapture is coming April 23rd. Numerologist says. How many are ready for it? I was ready for it yesterday. Listen, the end of the world may be near if a Christian numerologist is to be believed. Is the rapture finally here? One Christian numerologist says a biblical sign strongly suggests it. David Mead tells the UK Daily Express newspaper that on April 23rd, the sun and the moon will be in Virgo, as well as Jupiter, which represents the Messiah. For a certain branch of evangelical Christianity, that's us, by the way, Revelation 12:1-2 describes the beginning of what is known as the rapture and the second coming of Christ. It says a great sign appeared in heaven. Now, how many remember the documentary I did about Revelation chapter 12? This guy's like 6 months late. It's like he just came across this. He's 6 months late. We talked about the sign, and I went on national television on a documentary telling them that, listen, with all Christians they're saying this is going to happen, this is going to happen. I said, this is just a sign, and it is Revelation 12:1. It's a warning to America. Every single person on that said Israel's going to get a war on September 12th. We're going to have a breakout. The rapture is going to happen, and they were all wrong. Now, this guy says this, which is ludicrous to me, and I'm going to tell you why. According to me, the alignment represents the line of the tribe of Judah. And it does. I mean, he should have called me. I could have saved him a lot of time. Marking the rapture, the belief that Christ will bring the faithful into paradise prior to a period of tribulation. Meade said he believes the so-called Planet X, that's called Nibiru, by the way. It was also on the documentary. He says it's going to appear in the sky on the April date, causing volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and earthquakes. Two things. Number one, he has no knowledge at all. As a matter of fact, he makes every Christian look bad. Because Nibiru is supposed to be this major planet that's out past our solar system in something called the Oort cloud. I happen to have a minor degree in astronomy. Nibiru has never been classified as a planet by NASA. They don't believe it's there. It's not existent. And if it did exist, he's saying it's going to come in on April, and it's going to, by the way, if Nibiru was that big of a planet and it came into our solar system, you would see it for dozens of years before it came in. It would be picked up. That's not just a short hop from the Oort cloud to planet Earth. It's a long way. Okay? So it doesn't say, well, today I'm going to wake up by planet Earth. And if it did come into planet Earth, because of our rotation and because of our gravity, we would be expelled from the solar system. So if Nibiru was coming in, you and I would be flying out right now. And so it's not going to happen. Somebody said to me, well, Pastor, you don't know it's not going to happen. Let me tell you something. Even if he's right, which he's not, by the way, 100% wrong. Even if Jesus does come back on April 23rd, what does he win? You think you're going to go up to heaven and say, hey, you were right, man, we're getting raptured. It's a no-win. And if he's wrong, he just ruined all of his credibility. Let me just tell you, now the Lord can't come back on April 23rd, but he can come back before that. Amen. And so you have to understand that. So that's my take on that. Everybody asks me. We're getting all kinds of cards and letters and emails, so hopefully you can see that. All right, one last thing. You ready for some bizarre news? If you had to pick out a state that bizarre news would come from, what would it be? You're so smart. Look, Los Angeles is painting its city streets white in a bid to combat climate change. I am not kidding you. California officials are hoping their latest attempt to stem the rise of tides of climate change leads to a more socially conscious and cooler summer. Officials in Los Angeles have been painting streets white to reduce the effect of urban heat islands and combat the effect of climate change. The LA Street Services began rolling out the project, no pun intended, last May. The project involves applying a light gray coating of the product Cool Seal, made by the company Guard Top. They must be laughing all the way to the bank. While most Cool Seal pavements on the market are polymer-based, Cool Seal is a water-based asphalt emulsion. While each coating could last up to 7 years, they are very pricey, with an estimated cost of $40,000 per mile. California is broke to begin with. They're really going to go down. By reducing the temperatures of the city streets, officials say it can help reduce temperatures in neighborhoods where the sealant is applied. Yeah, probably it can cool down hot tar for about a couple of minutes, but it's not going to do anything for climate change. I mean, come on. They'd be better off taking all their money and trying to cap a volcano, because that may change something. So that's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask the ushers that they come forward. Man, I'll tell you again, it's worse and worse, doesn't it?